FIFA changed the rules. Not tweaked them. Not adjusted them. Changed them. 7 rules. All at once. All live at the 2026 World Cup. Starting now. Some of these have been discussed for years. Some of them were rushed through after a single incident. Some of them will work exactly as intended. Some of them will create new problems nobody thought about yet. All of them are happening whether players, managers, or fans are ready or not. Here is every new rule explained. What it is, why it exists, and what actually happens when it meets reality. Rule 1. Cover your mouth in a confrontation. Red card. This is the one that surprised everyone. If a player covers their mouth with their hand, their arm, or their shirt during a confrontation with another player, the referee issues a red card. Not a warning. Not a yellow. A red card. Immediately. To understand why this rule exists, you need to know why it was introduced. Vinicius Jr., Champions League, 2024. An opponent said something to him during a confrontation. The opponent covered their mouth when they said it. Nobody could prove what was said. Nobody could lip-read it. The cameras caught the gesture but not the words. The player received a ban, later extended to cover the World Cup. But the incident exposed a gap in the rules. Players had figured out that covering your mouth meant the evidence disappeared. FIFA's response was to make the act itself the offense. The logic is this. In a confrontation, there is no innocent reason to cover your mouth. If what you are saying is acceptable, you do not need to hide it. The covering is the admission. Some players will argue context matters. Some managers will argue the rule is too broad. FIFA's answer is that context was exactly the problem before. Context required proof. Proof required evidence. Evidence could be hidden with one hand. Now there is no context. There is just a red card. There is an exemption. Players who cover their mouths while having a friendly conversation with a teammate on the opposing national team will not be punished. 2 friends from the same club, now on opposite sides at the World Cup, catching up quietly. That is allowed. The line between friendly and confrontational will be decided by one referee, in real time in front of 80,000 people with the match on the line. That is where this rule lives or dies. Rule 2. 5 seconds to restart. The clock is visible. This rule targets the most boring 3 minutes in football. The winger who has been handed the ball for a throw-in and is now slowly, deliberately rotating it in their hands, making eye contact with nobody, watching the clock tick. If a referee decides a player is deliberately delaying a throw-in or a goal kick, they raise their hand and start a visible 5-second countdown. Throw-in not taken in time, possession switches to the other team. Goal kick not taken in time, the opposition gets a corner. The goalkeeper already had an 8-second rule for holding the ball in their hands. This extends the same idea to every dead ball restart on the pitch. The phrase there is deliberately delaying. That judgment belongs to the referee. Not every slow throw-in gets a countdown. The referee decides when the delay is intentional. In theory, this compresses the dead time that turns a 90-minute match into a 65-minute match. In practice, players are extremely creative when it comes to finding new ways to do nothing. Time wasting will not disappear. It will just move somewhere the 5-second rule cannot reach. But the most obvious version of it, the one that has annoyed every fan for 30 years, now has a consequence. That is not nothing. Rule 3. 10 seconds to leave the pitch. Or your team pays. When the substitution board goes up, the player coming off has 10 seconds to reach the touchline and leave the pitch. If they do not make it in 10 seconds, the player coming on is held on the sideline for 1 full minute. The team plays with 10 men for that minute before the substitution is completed. You know exactly which substitution this rule is targeting. The striker who was sprinting at full pace 30 seconds ago is suddenly limping, slowly, clutching something, tying a boot that was never untied, discovering a cramp that appeared at the precise moment the match entered injury time with a 1-goal lead. Every fan of every team has watched this. Every fan of every team has also benefited from it at some point and said nothing. 10 seconds is the new number. That is the rule. No exceptions for the cramp. No exceptions for the boot. No exceptions. The counterargument is that 10 seconds is not very long if a player is genuinely injured. The answer to that counterargument is that genuinely injured players should not be walking off the pitch. They should be receiving treatment, which leads directly to the next rule. Rule 4. Fake an injury. Come off for a minute. If a player receives medical attention from the physio on the pitch, they must leave the pitch for 1 minute after play restarts. Not immediately, after the restart. This is aimed at one specific situation. The team defending a lead in the final 10 minutes. Player goes down. The physio comes on. The clock runs. Players walk slowly around the pitch. The manager thinks through the next 5 minutes. Then the player recovers miraculously and continues. That was a free tactical timeout. It was not in the rules. It was just something everyone did because there was no consequence for it. Now there is a consequence. You want the physio, you come off for a minute. Your team plays with 10 men for that minute. Your choice. If the injury is real and serious, the player comes off for treatment. That is what should happen anyway. If the injury is not real, the cost is now a minute of 10-man football. Managers will do that math very quickly. Goalkeepers are exempt from this rule. Removing a goalkeeper from the pitch for a minute would create situations that are genuinely unworkable. So the rule does not apply to them. The goalkeeper's version of this problem, the dramatic collapse in the penalty area, the slow walk back to the goal, the gloves that suddenly need adjusting, mostly remains. One exception. One rule. These things are always complicated. Rule 5. VAR has more power than before. More than you probably realize. VAR was introduced to correct clear and obvious errors. Over time, the definition of what qualifies as a clear and obvious error has expanded. At the 2026 World Cup, it expands again. VAR can now review second yellow cards. Before this change, VAR could only check straight red cards. A second yellow, no matter how wrong, was final the moment the referee showed it. That is no longer the case. VAR can now check corner kick decisions, but only if the review can be completed immediately without delaying the restart. If the check takes too long, it does not happen. VAR can now review fouls that occurred before a set piece was taken. This is the one that will generate the most debate. If an attacker blocked a defender, grabbed a shirt, or committed a foul before a corner was struck and a goal resulted, VAR can go back and rule the goal out. Not after the goal. Before the ball was even in play. Every set-piece goal is now potentially reviewable before the moment the ball crossed the line. VAR can also correct mistaken identity. If the referee carded the wrong player, VAR identifies the correct one and the card is moved. More VAR. Bigger VAR. VAR with a longer memory and more jurisdiction. Whether you think this is good depends on how much you trust referees compared to how much you trust technology. Both of those are reasonable positions. Both of them will be tested at this tournament. Rule 6. DOGSO. The red card that disappears if a goal is scored. DOGSO stands for denying an obvious goal-scoring opportunity. The rule has existed for years. Foul a player who is through on goal with nobody between them and the goalkeeper, and the foul is a red card. The goal-scoring opportunity was denied. The punishment is severe. The old version had one adjustment. If the referee played advantage after the foul, meaning they let play continue to see if the attacking team could still score, and a goal was scored anyway, the red card was reduced to a yellow. Because the opportunity was not ultimately denied. But the card still existed. The new version goes further. If advantage is played and a goal is scored, there is no card at all. Not a red. Not a yellow. Nothing. The goal-scoring opportunity was not denied because it resulted in a goal. The foul happened. The goal happened anyway. The logic is that the punishment exists to compensate for a lost goal. If the goal is not lost, the punishment should not exist. This is a sensible change. It rewards referees for playing advantage. It punishes defenders less harshly for fouls that turned out not to matter. Keeps more players on the pitch. It also means defenders will know that a foul in the right moment, when the attacker is likely to miss, carries a different calculation than before. That calculation will happen in real time in a fraction of a second in a World Cup knockout match. Football is still football. Rule 7. Hydration breaks. Every half. Mandatory. Every match at the 2026 World Cup will include a compulsory 3-minute hydration break in each half. The referee chooses when somewhere around the midpoint of each half. The break is mandatory. It is not optional. Cannot be skipped. 3 matches are scheduled in Miami. Several more in cities where June heat and high humidity are standard conditions. Players will be running at full intensity in temperatures that make the air feel like something you have to push through. FIFA made this rule because the conditions required it. That is the honest explanation. The 3-minute break is officially a hydration break. Players drink water. That is what it is for. It is also 3 minutes where the manager can speak to the squad, where the coaches can adjust, where the team can regroup without a formal timeout being called. This is not a coincidence. It is just not called a timeout. It has a different name. Every team will use it exactly like a timeout. Nobody will admit this. 7 rules. Every single one of them aimed at the same underlying problem. Football matches have too much time inside them where nothing is happening. FIFA wants less of that. Some of these will work. Some will produce new arguments that nobody anticipated. Some referees will apply them confidently. Some will apply them inconsistently and create moments that define the tournament for the wrong reasons. All 7 are in force. Starting now. The game has not changed. The rules around it have. You're welcome.